The mahogany table was cold beneath my fingertips. It was a ridiculous piece of furniture for a tech company, all glossy surface and sharp, modern angles, meant to project an image of success that felt increasingly hollow. I focused on a tiny, almost imperceptible scratch near the edge, a flaw in the perfect facade. It was easier than looking at the two people sitting across from me. "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary," Leo Sterling smirked. It wasn't a smile of warmth, but a tight, calculated expression of a man who believed he'd just checkmated his opponent. "Nothing personal, Arthur. Strictly a cost-cutting measure. A strategic realignment." Arthur. My name is Arthur Croft. I am 57 years old, and for the last 22 years I have been the lead systems architect at Omni Shelter Solutions. I didn't just work there, I built it. I designed the digital foundations, laid the network cabling with my own hands in the early days, wrote the core code that now managed over 85 residential properties across 6 states. I was the architect, the engineer, and the custodian. I had made everything run with such seamless, silent efficiency that the executives upstairs had forgotten the complex machinery whirring beneath their feet until they decided they could no longer afford the mechanic. Leo Sterling, the newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer, was 44. He wore a suit that cost more than my first server rack and glasses with thin titanium frames that he probably thought made him look intellectual. He'd been recruited from a flashy Silicon Valley startup 3 months ago, brought in to disrupt the legacy model and drive scalable agile growth. His MBA from Stanford was mentioned so often in his introduction, it might as well have been part of his name. Sitting beside him was Brenda Walsh from Human Resources. Her expression was a masterclass in professional sympathy, a mask of regret that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The severance package is quite generous, Arthur," she said, her voice a soft, placating murmur. She slid a black folder across the perfect table. 20 weeks salary, plus full payout of your accrued vacation and a pro-rated bonus. We're also offering outplacement services. I opened the folder. The numbers were indeed generous. A small fortune to buy my silence, my compliance, and my dignity. I nodded slowly, absorbing the numbers, the legal jargon, the finality of it all. "Thank you," I said, my voice even, devoid of the tremor I felt in my soul. I closed the folder. Leo looked almost disappointed. His smirk had faded into a puzzled frown. He'd been prepared for a fight, for tears, for anger, for threats of age discrimination lawsuits. He had his rebuttals ready, his HR-approved phrases to shut down any dissent. My calm acceptance was a script he hadn't rehearsed for. "Well, is that all you have to say?" he asked, unable to hide his confusion. "What would you like me to say, Leo?" "Most people in your position, they have questions, concerns," he pressed, leaning forward slightly. I shrugged, a small, weary motion. "It seems pretty straightforward to me. The numbers are clear. My role is being eliminated. I understand." Leo and Brenda exchanged a quick, glancing look. Brenda's professional sympathetic mask slipped for a microsecond, revealing her own bewilderment. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that I wasn't calm. I was just done. There's a profound difference. Calm implies a state of peace. What I felt was the absolute exhaustion of a man who has been pushing a boulder up a hill for 20 years, only to have the people he's doing it for decide the boulder is too expensive and they'd rather hire 3 children to throw pebbles instead. "Well," Leo continued, regrouping, "we would, of course, appreciate your help with the transition. The new engineering team will need significant guidance on the system architecture. We'd like to propose a consulting arrangement for a few weeks. Paid, of course, handsomely." The new engineering team. The 3 junior engineers who were collectively worth my salary. I could almost picture them, bright-eyed, recent graduates who knew every new framework, but never had to debug a critical system failure at 3 a.m. with millions of dollars on the line. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing with absolute certainty that I would not. We shook hands. Leo's grip was firm, overly confident. Brenda's was soft and fleeting. And just like that, 22 years ended not with a bang but with the quiet click of a conference room door. My office was a testament to my tenure. Framed photos of my wife, Clara, and our daughter Emily, now grown and living in Chicago. A faded blueprint of the original server room layout, signed by the company's founder. A shelf of technical manuals, their spines cracked from use. A coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Engineer," a gift from my team. It all fit into a single, sad cardboard box. A few colleagues peeked out from their cubicles as I carried the box through the open-plan office. Their eyes were a mixture of sadness, fear, and guilt. They quickly looked away, suddenly fascinated by their monitors. They were afraid. Afraid to meet my eye. Afraid to say goodbye. Afraid that they were next. The axe had fallen and the sound echoed through the entire floor. As I walked through the parking garage to my 10-year-old Ford pickup truck, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the infrastructure specialist I'd personally hired 15 years ago. "This is absolute BS, Arthur. The whole team is in shock. Sterling has no idea what he's done." I didn't respond. I started the truck and drove home in silence. The empty passenger seat where my box sat felt like an accusation. Home was a modest house on the outskirts of the city. Its greatest feature, a large wooden deck overlooking the vast gray expanse of Lake Michigan. That evening I sat on that deck, nursing a glass of single malt scotch, watching the sunset bleed into the water, turning it to a sheet of hammered bronze. The ice cubes clinked in the silence. Clara came out and placed a warm hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything for a long time. Just stood with me, sharing the weight of the day. "What will you do now?" she asked, her voice gentle. I took a slow sip of the scotch, the peaty smoke warming my throat. "Something will turn up," I said, the words feeling both hollow and strangely true. What Leo Sterling didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to learn in his 3-month whirlwind of disruption, was that I hadn't just built their systems, I'd crafted them. Large sections were custom-coded by my own hand, intricate, elegant solutions to complex problems. The documentation was minimal, not out of malice, but because the company had consistently refused to fund a proper technical writing team. "We'll get to it next quarter," they'd said, for 24 quarters in a row. Only I understood the deep redundancies woven into the core architecture. Only I knew the location of the hidden security layers designed to be invisible until they were needed. Only I held the complete map of the intricate network pathways in my head. It was a tapestry I had woven alone, and I had no intention of now teaching someone else to decipher the pattern. I started at Omni Shelter back when it was just Great Lakes Properties, a small family-run outfit managing a handful of apartment complexes. The owner, Walter Brennan, a man with a firm handshake and old-school integrity, had hired me away from a stable corporate job. "I'm expanding, Arthur," he told me over a steak dinner. "I don't need someone who can just fix computers. I need someone who can build me something solid, something that will last." And I did. Over 2 decades, I transformed 2 dusty desktops and a dial-up connection into the Nexus, a fully integrated property management ecosystem. It handled everything: tenant screening with custom algorithmic risk assessments, automated maintenance workflows that dispatched contractors based on severity and location, a financial engine that processed millions in rent payments with flawless accuracy. It was my life's work. When Walter retired 8 years ago, his son, David, took over and almost immediately sold the company to a private equity firm, Perseus Capital. They rebranded it Omni Shelter Solutions, moved into this shiny glass office, and brought in a new wave of executives. The culture shifted. Quarterly earnings reports became the holy grail. Long-term stability was a boring, old-fashioned concept. My warnings about technical debt and the need for system documentation were met with patronizing smiles and budget rejections. Then came the consultants, smooth-talking 20-somethings who preached about cloud-native solutions and disruptive SaaS platforms. They'd sit through my technical briefings with glazed eyes, then present glossy proposals for off-the-shelf software that would be cheaper in the short term, but would never integrate with the deep custom functionality of the Nexus. I was the stubborn old guard, the naysayer, the roadblock to progress. Slowly, I was edged out of planning meetings. My emails began to go unanswered. Claire had seen it coming. "They're pushing you out, Art," she'd said one night months ago, her worry lines deepening in the lamplight. "You need to prepare, update your resume." I brushed her off. "They need me. No one else knows how it all works. The whole place would fall apart without me." "That might be exactly why they want you gone," she'd replied with a chilling prescience. 6 months ago, they hired Leo Sterling. He arrived like a hurricane, talking about legacy system sunsetting and personnel optimization. He hired 3 fresh-faced engineers and had them shadow me. I answered their questions patiently, but I knew they were only skimming the surface. They were learning the what, not the why. They couldn't grasp the decades of context, the lessons learned from every past failure baked into the system's design. When the problem started last week, a minor glitch in the reporting module that the juniors couldn't fix, Leo had stopped by my office. "Quick meeting tomorrow morning, Arthur," he'd said with a casual wave. "Just a quarterly check-in, nothing to worry about." I should have seen it coming. The first call came precisely 13 days after my termination. I was in my home study, a room filled with books and the comforting smell of old paper, trying to distill 22 years of experience into 2 pages of bullet points. My phone vibrated on the desk. Leo Sterling. I let it ring out. He could talk to my voicemail. "Arthur, it's Leo. Look, we're having a bit of an issue with a tenant portal. Authentication is failing intermittently. The junior team is on it, but they're having trouble tracing the logic in the legacy code. Could you give us a quick callback? It would just be a 15-minute consult. We'll make it worth your while." I deleted the message. Legacy code. The words were a deliberate slight, reducing 2 decades of innovation to something obsolete. 2 more calls came that day. Each voicemail was a little more strained, a little less confident. By evening, Marcus texted me. "Nexus is having a full-body meltdown, tenant portal down for 4 hours, maintenance queue is frozen, Sterling is running around like his hair's on fire, told you so." The next morning, my phone rang again. Brenda Walsh, OmniShelter HR. "Arthur, I hope you're well," she began, her voice dripping with synthetic concern. "I'm calling because we'd like to formally discuss that consulting arrangement we mentioned. The situation is somewhat urgent, and we're prepared to be very generous with the compensation." I picked up the phone. "How generous?" $350 an hour, minimum 4-hour engagement. "I'll think about it and get back to you," I said, and hung up before she could reply. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the lake, which was choppy and gray under an overcast sky. Clara placed a mug of coffee in front of me. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that they're discovering the true meaning of cost-benefit analysis. Over the next 72 hours, the calls became a deluge. Leo, Brenda, and then, surprisingly, David Brennan, the former owner's son who still held a seat on the board. The issues were escalating. The tenant portal was completely inaccessible. The maintenance scheduling system was throwing cryptographic errors. Most critically, the automated payment processing system had failed, meaning thousands of residents' rent payments had not been processed, and thousands more had received incorrect late fees. I didn't respond to any of them. On the 4th day, an email appeared in my personal inbox. The sender was Eleanor Vance, CEO of Airy Management, a regional competitor to OmniShelter. They were smaller, but had a reputation for quality and were growing aggressively. "Dear Mr. Croft, I was sorry to hear about your departure from OmniShelter. I've long admired the technical architecture you built there. It's considered the gold standard in our industry. We at Airy are embarking on a complete overhaul of our own systems and are seeking a visionary leader to architect our future. Would you be open to a conversation? Sincerely, Eleanor Vance." I replied within the hour, and we set a meeting for the next day. That evening, as Clara and I were preparing a simple pasta dinner, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and went to answer it. Leo Sterling stood on my porch. He was a mess. His designer glasses were slightly crooked, his usually impeccable hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit looked like he'd slept in it. The smugness was entirely gone, replaced with a panicked exhaustion. Leo breathed, Arthur, the word clouding in the chilly evening air. I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a DEF-CON 1 situation. The entire nexus is down. I mean, fully offline. The payment failure corrupted a primary database cluster. The juniors are lost. The external consultants we brought in are talking about a full-scale data loss event. We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you $500 an hour, a blank check, whatever it takes. I leaned against the doorframe, saying nothing for a long moment, letting him squirm in the silence. I thought of the cardboard box in my garage. I thought of the phrase, 3 junior engineers. I thought of the quarterly budget meetings where my requests for a documentation team were laughed out of the room. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, Leo," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "It sounds serious, but I'm afraid I can't help you. I have an interview tomorrow. Like you said, something will turn up." The look of stunned, utter disbelief on his face was more satisfying than any amount of money could ever be. I closed the door gently on his spluttering protests and went back to my kitchen. For the first time since the termination meeting, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't vindication. It was clarity. I was not going to help them fix what they so arrogantly broken. The interview with Eleanor Vance was held in a quiet corner of an independent bookstore cafe far from the corporate centers of either company. She was a sharp, intelligent woman in her 50s, with a firm handshake and keen eyes that missed nothing. "I've followed your work for years, Mr. Croft. The nexus at OmniShelter is legendary, albeit in a very niche circle. The efficiency metrics they reported were industry-leading. No one else has come close to that level of integration." "Thank you," I said. "It took time and care." "Time and care are precisely what I want to invest in," she replied. "We're not looking for a quick fix or a flashy new platform that will be obsolete in 2 years. We want to build something foundational, something resilient. We need an architect who understands scale, security, and longevity. We need you." It was a direct, honest offer. No games, no corporate posturing. "I'm interested," I said. "Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the position of Chief Systems Architect, full benefits, a significant equity stake, and a base salary 30% higher than your compensation at OmniShelter." It was an outstanding offer, far better than I had expected. "Why me?" I asked, a faint echo of my former employer's logic in my question. "There are younger architects out there. They know the latest languages, the newest paradigms. They'd be cheaper." Eleanor laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "You sound like your friend Leo Sterling. We tried that, hired a team of brilliant young minds from top-tier programs. They built us a beautiful, modern, utterly fragile house of cards. It collapses under any meaningful load. We don't need cheap, Arthur. We need reliable. We need robust. We need someone who builds with steel and concrete, not with cardboard and hope." I accepted the offer on the spot. Meanwhile, the situation at OmniShelter was spiraling into a full-blown catastrophe. Marcus kept me updated via encrypted messages. "They brought in Titan Consulting, charging $1,000 an hour. They're talking about catastrophic system failure and cascading data corruption. Rumor is Westfield Properties, their biggest client, 35% revenue, is furious. Payments are still screwed." A week after I started at Aerie, my phone rang again. Leo Sterling. I was tempted to let it go to voicemail forever, but a cold curiosity made me answer. "Arthur, please." His voice was stripped of all its former arrogance, raw and desperate. "This is getting biblical. We've lost access to 3 months of financial records. The backup restoration failed. The consultants say the backup protocols have, I don't know, military-grade encryption and verification steps that weren't documented. Tenants are getting lawyers involved. We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you $500 an hour, a blank check, whatever it takes." I was in my new office at Aerie, a space with a view of a small park. It was quiet. I was reviewing plans for a new database cluster. "Leo, I'm employed elsewhere now, an exclusive contract. I'm afraid I can't help you."
We'll double whatever they're paying you. Triple. Just 2 days, 48 hours of your time. That's all we need. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? He cried. Revenge? Is that it? Are you sitting there enjoying this, watching us burn? I paused, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. No, Leo, I'm not enjoying it, but you made a business decision. You decided my experience, my institutional knowledge was a line item to be minimized. You're now discovering what the true cost of that decision actually is. There was a choked silence on the other end. Then a new wheedling tone entered his voice. The board wants to discuss bringing you back. Full reinstatement, your old salary plus a 30% retention bonus, a seat at the leadership table. For a single fleeting moment, I felt a hot surge of vindication. It was quickly washed away by a cold wave of reality. Returning would be a temporary fix. I'd be walking back into a den of executives who had already shown their hand. I'd be a costly bandage to be ripped off again the moment the bleeding stopped.
I appreciate the offer, Leo, but I've made a commitment to Airy management. His voice hardened, the desperation curdling into threat. You need to understand, Arthur, there could be legal implications here. If our lawyers discover you intentionally obfuscated system maintenance procedures, designed systems to be deliberately opaque, we have non-compete clauses, intellectual property concerns. This could get very messy for you. There it was, the threat I had been waiting for, the final pathetic gambit of a drowning man. The system is exactly as it was when I left, I replied, my voice icy and calm. A system the company repeatedly refused to fund proper documentation for. Every single line of code belongs to OmniShelter as per my contract. I have taken nothing with me except my experience and my expertise. But by all means, have your lawyers contact mine. I hung up. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from a pure, white-hot anger I had been suppressing for weeks. The accusation that I had sabotaged them, that I had built traps into my life's work, was the ultimate insult. At Airy, I was building something new, something better. We were doing it right from the ground up. Comprehensive documentation, thorough training programs for the engineering team I was carefully assembling, redundant systems designed for clarity and resilience. I was building a legacy, not a trap. I wasn't going to look back, and I certainly wasn't going to help them. Some lessons can only be learned through total catastrophic failure. A month into my new role, I had an unexpected visitor. Marcus stood awkwardly in the doorway of my new office, holding a battered laptop bag. "Got time for a coffee?" he asked, a hopeful smile on his face. Over coffee at a nearby diner, Marcus unloaded the full, unvarnished truth of the chaos at OmniShelter. "It's so much worse than anyone knows, Arthur," he said, leaning across the Formica table and lowering his voice. "They've lost historical data, not just recent stuff. Tenant payment histories, maintenance records from 3 years back. The Titan consultants say the backup archives are corrupted. They're talking about a multi-million-dollar 6 to 9 month recovery process, maybe longer. They might have to rebuild from scratch." I wasn't surprised. The backup system I designed was incredibly robust, but it had multiple precise authentication and verification handshakes between the live system and the backup servers. It was designed to prevent unauthorized access or data theft. Skip one step, misinterpret one log file, and the system would assume a breach and encrypt everything into an indecipherable lump. It was a feature, not a bug. A feature they'd never bothered to learn about. "That's not all," Marcus continued, his expression turning grim. He opened his laptop, tapped a few keys, and spun it around to face me. "I was trying to help the Titan guys understand the payment processing logic, and I found these, buried in archived email chains from before you were let go." It was a series of emails between Leo Sterling and the board of directors. The subject line, Legacy Staff Optimization and System Modernization Plan. My name was highlighted throughout. Croft's custom architecture is an unsustainable relic. Its complexity is a deliberate strategy to create job security, not operational efficiency.
We can achieve 400% ROI within 18 months by transitioning to a standardized, off-the-shelf SaaS solution and replacing senior staff with junior talent. Projected annual savings, $1.2 million in salary and benefits alone. The one line from Leo jumped out, its cynicism taking my breath away. Hale has made himself a priest of a forgotten religion. We need to tear down the temple and build a supermarket. I read through the emails, a cold detachment settling over me. The personal insult was secondary to the staggering professional incompetence. There's more, Marcus said, closing the laptop. The private equity firm Perseus Capital, they've been planning to sell OmniShelter for over a year. Leo wasn't hired to improve the company. He was hired to slash costs, juice the short-term profit numbers, and make the balance sheet look pretty for a sale. He was a hatchet man. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The rushed decisions, the disregard for sustainability, the focus on optics over substance. It was never about building a better future for OmniShelter. It was about dressing a pig for market. "Why are you showing me this, Marcus?" I asked. "Because I quit yesterday. And I'm not the only one. The whole senior IT team is gone. The place is being held together by interns and Titan consultants billing by the hour." He hesitated. "And because Westfield Properties just formally notified the board they are terminating their contract. They've lost all confidence in OmniShelter's ability to manage their properties."
I let out a low whistle. Westfield was OmniShelter's cornerstone client. Losing them wasn't a blow, it was a mortal wound, especially with a sale pending. "What will you do now?" I asked. Marcus grinned. "Actually, I was hoping Aerie might be in the market for a grumpy old infrastructure specialist who understands how to build things that don't break." Later that afternoon, I spoke with Eleanor Vance about hiring Marcus. She agreed immediately. "We're building a team, Arthur. I want the best, people who value craftsmanship." That evening, another call came from Leo. This time his voice was stripped bare, a hollow shell of its former confidence. "Arthur, please." The word was a gasp. "Westfield is gone. The board is talking about litigation against me. The sale process has completely collapsed. Perseus Capital is furious. We are days away from this company becoming insolvent. We need your help. Name your price. Anything." "I'm sorry, Leo. I can't help you." "It has to be about the money. Everything is about the money." "No," I said, my voice firm. "It's about respect. Respect for the work. Respect for the experience it takes to build something meaningful. Respect you never showed." The line was silent for a long moment. "You knew," he whispered, the realization dawning on him. "You knew exactly what would happen. You knew which threads to pull to make it all unravel." "No, Leo," I said, ending the call with a sense of finality. "I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it. Information I tried to give you, repeatedly, for free." I felt no triumph, no regret, just the quiet, solid certainty that the universe, in its own slow and methodical way, occasionally balances the scales. The opportunity presented itself faster than anyone could have predicted. Just 2 months into my tenure at Aerie, Eleanor called me into her office. Her face was a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I just got off the phone with Robert Finch. Robert Finch was the CEO of Westfield Properties. They've officially severed ties with OmniShelter effective next month. They want to know if we can handle their portfolio. It was a staggering proposition. Westfield's portfolio would more than triple Aeria's management base. It was a chance to leapfrog from a mid-tier player to a dominant regional force overnight. "We're not ready for that scale, Eleanor," I said honestly. "The new framework is solid, but we're only at 40% implementation. Our infrastructure can't handle that load." "What would it take?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with challenge. "If we had to." I did the math in my head, mentally scaling servers, estimating bandwidth, calculating development time and testing, and even then, it would be a risk. "Robert is desperate," Eleanor said. "The chaos at OmniShelter is a PR nightmare for them. Tenants are complaining. He's willing to sign a long-term contract that includes upfront funding for the infrastructure expansion we need. He's giving us a 14-week window." This was the moment.
the precipice. If we succeeded, Aerie would be unstoppable. If we failed, we'd take Westfield down with us and be finished. Let me work on the architecture. I'll have a preliminary plan by tomorrow.
I didn't sleep that night. I lived on coffee and drew diagrams until my hand cramped. I mapped data migration paths, designed load balancing schemes, planned fail-safes. By dawn, I had a plan, a bold, multi-stage migration that would onboard Westfield's properties in manageable phases. Eleanor studied the plans the next morning. "This is brilliant, Arthur. Aggressive, but brilliant." Her finger tapped a section of the timeline. "But this documentation and training phase here, it adds over 2 weeks to the critical path." "It's non-negotiable," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "That's the whole point. That's where OmniShelter failed. We document as we build. We train as we go. We create redundancy in knowledge, not just in hardware. There will be no single point of failure, human or machine." Eleanor looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, a slow, respectful smile spreading across her face. "I'll take your word for it. Let's do it. Let's build it right." The following weeks were a blur of controlled chaos. We hired 5 new engineers, including 2 more refugees from the sinking ship of OmniShelter. Marcus built a brilliant data migration tool that could safely translate and import OmniShelter's complex data structures into our new, cleaner system. I designed a modular, scalable architecture that was both powerful and, crucially, understandable. Halfway through the project, I received an email from an unexpected address. David Brennan. "Arthur, I am so sorry for how this unfolded. The board was misled about the true state of our technical debt and the fragility of our position. We placed our trust in the wrong people and are now paying a catastrophic price. Graham has been terminated. If you ever reconsider, the door here will always be open for you. Sincerely, David." I stared at the screen for a long time. I felt a pang of sadness for Walter Brennan's legacy, now in ruins, but I felt no pull to return. I didn't respond. 10 weeks into our 14-week timeline, we were ready for the first phase, migrating Westfield's smallest region. The day before the launch, Eleanor called me into her office. Robert Finch himself was there, a tall, imposing man with a grip that could crush walnuts. "So you're the architect," he said, fixing me with a direct gaze. "You say you're building us something that won't break." "That's the plan, sir," I said. "I also hear you built the system that did," he said, his tone neutral, probing. "I built a system that worked flawlessly for 2 decades when maintained by those who understood it," I replied, neither defensive nor apologetic. He gave a curt nod, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "OmniShelter is finished, you know. Perseus Capital is desperate to unload it. They're not finding any buyers." He paused, looking between me and Eleanor. "Except one." I knew what he was going to say before he said it. "Us," Eleanor said. "We're considering making an offer, a very low one. They have assets, properties, client contracts that are still valuable. Their technology is a write-off, but their market share isn't." "If that happens," Robert Finch said, his eyes locked on me, "we'd want someone who understands both companies to lead the technical integration, someone who can salvage what's worth salvaging from the wreckage and merge it seamlessly with what you're building here. Would you be willing to do that?" The irony was so profound it was almost funny. To be asked to reassemble the very thing I had built and they had destroyed. "I'd be willing," I said after a considered pause, "but on one condition." "Name it," Eleanor said. "We do it right, my way. Full documentation, proper training, no shortcuts, no value engineering. We build it to last." "Agreed," they said in unison. As I walked back to my desk, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge. I felt the simple, profound satisfaction of a craftsman being given the tools and the trust to do his best work. 6 months later, I stood in the familiar lobby of OmniShelter's headquarters. The gleaming OmniShelter logo was being taken down from the wall. In its place, workers hung a new sign, Aerie Integrated Solutions. The acquisition had gone through for pennies on the dollar. Perseus Capital had cut their losses and run.
Eleanor and I walked through the offices. We greeted the shell-shocked remains of the OmniShelter staff that would be staying on. Some couldn't meet my eye. Others looked at me with something like hope. The old guard, those who had been there since the Walter Brennan days, nodded with weary respect. Leo Sterling was long gone, along with the executive team that had empowered him. David Brennan had stayed on as a consultant to help manage the transition, a living reminder of the company's roots. In the main conference room, the entire staff had assembled. Eleanor introduced me as the integration officer. Many of you know Arthur Croft. He built the systems that this company was founded on. Now he will lead us in building something new and better from the foundation up. As I looked out at the faces, I felt no urge to gloat. What would be the point? Instead, I laid out the transition plan with clarity and compassion. I emphasized that no one would be left behind due to short-sighted cost-cutting. The irony was a silent presence in the room, a lesson learned by all. 1 year later, the integration was complete. Airy Integrated Solutions was the largest and most technologically advanced property management firm in the region. The system I designed hummed along perfectly, fully documented, fully understood by a well-trained team. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Eleanor. The leaves on the trees lining the driveway were fiery red and gold. She said, "The board has approved your proposal. The Airy Technical Institute will launch next quarter. You'll have a full budget to design the curriculum and hire the finest instructors you can find." This had been my final condition, not for a bigger title or a larger bonus, but for the creation of an educational division dedicated to teaching the next generation of engineers how to build things properly, with care, with documentation, and with an eye on forever. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said. "This means a great deal." "No, Arthur," she replied with her voice soft with sincerity. "Thank you. What you've built here, it's a culture, it's a standard, it's a reminder that some things are worth building properly the first time." Later, as I was packing up my integration office, David Brennan appeared at my door. "Got a minute?" he asked. We walked to the courtyard where employees took their smoke breaks. "My father asks about you. He's down in Naples now. Still follows the industry news. He was glad to hear you landed on your feet. He always said that letting you go would be the single worst mistake this company could ever make." David shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "Turns out, he was right." I nodded, unsure how to respond. He continued, "I learned something from all this. Real value isn't always on the balance sheet. Sometimes it's in the quiet competence of the people who actually know how to keep the lights on." As I drove home along the shore of Lake Michigan, I thought about value. The value of experience. The value of doing things right. The value of building systems and companies meant to last. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I had simply moved forward, building something better, something durable. I had proven my worth not by fighting the past, but by building the future. And in the end, the results had spoken for themselves, louder than any argument or accusation ever could. Sometimes, the most powerful response to being undervalued is silence, followed by the relentless, undeniable proof of your true worth.